Hi everybody, it's Sminty here with our Thursday report for YourNews.com Detroit. It's Radio Ratings Day, lots of news. Let me run through the ratings for you. First, let's start off with all listeners all day. That's people age 12 plus. Number 1, WDVD, the ABC Citadel-owned Hot Hits player with a 6.4. That's up from a 5.9 the previous month in first place. Second place overall, WXYT, the home of the Tigers and the Red Wings, and now the Pistons. They went from a 5.4 to a 6.0 during the recently concluded pennant race. Third place, WYCD, Country without a competitor, went from a 5.1 to a 5.6 in third place. Fourth, oldie station WOMC went from a 5.8 down to a 5.4 during the month of September. Fifth place, WJLB, the pace-setting Clare Channel urban station, 4.7 to a 5.3 in September. In sixth place, WRIF went from a 4.7 to a 5.0, good for seventh place, or sixth place. Seventh place belongs to WJR. They went from a 4.7 to a 5.0. In eighth place was WKQI, 5.5 to a 4.9. That's a number to watch, as they will now have new competition for the young listenership, now with the 98.7 smooth jazz, changing to a contemporary hits format. Ninth place, WCSX from a 4.1 to a 4.6, and in 10th position was WDRQ with a 4.5 to a 4.4. Of course, one of the great low overhead stations. They pay nothing for air talent, all music all the time. In the mornings, among all listeners 12 plus, Drew and Mike, number 1 with a 7.7. That's up from a 7.2 as they rebuild their ratings after Drew's return in July. In second place, WJR, Paul W. Smith went from a 6.2 to a 6.9 among all listeners, good for second place. Third, Dick Purton went from a 6.4 to a 6.0, lost 0.4, but still good for third place among all listeners. Fourth, Dr. Don at WYCD Country with his compatriots Grunwald and et al. They finished in fourth place with a 5.2, up from a 4.8. Tying them for fourth place was WDVD, Blaine and Lisa, which went from a 4.3 to a 5.2. Sixth place, WXYT FM, that would be Jay Towers and Bill McAllister with a 5.1, good for sixth place. They were up 0.3. In seventh place, the WJLB Morning Show, 4.0 to 5.0, picking up a full point and tied for seventh. In eighth place, Joe Donovan and Roberta Jacina at WWJ went from a 5.8 to a 5.0. Not unusual considering it's the end of summer and their ratings tend to be weather and traffic driven in the morning. Ninth place, again, Mojo in the Morning went from a 5.0 to a 4.7 among all listeners. You'll see that mirrored in other demographics. That's good for ninth place. Tying them for ninth place, WDRQ, again, disc jockey list with a 4.6 to a 4.7. That's among all listeners, and those ratings are often ignored by advertisers. Here's the key advertising demographic, age 25 to 54. Let's start off with all listeners all the time. Number 1 station, 2554 WXYT, sports talk and play-by-play. Leading the pack with a 7.7 in September. If you throw in their AM rating of 0.6, that brings them up over an 8 to an 8.3. Second place, WRIF, 7.2, down from an 8.0 overall. You'll see that Drew and Mike are outpacing the station. In third position, WDVD, steady with a 6.9, both for August and September, good for third place. The fourth place finisher in the Key 2554 demo, WJLB, the urban station, 4.9 to a 5.9 as they picked up a full rating point. Fifth, WYCD, country station again, with no competition, 5.4 to a 5.8. Sixth place, WDRQ, all the hits all the time, no talk, 5.8 to 5.7. Seventh place, WKQI, 6.1 to a 5.2. Again, that does not bode well for the station in light of new competition in the marketplace. Eighth, WCSX went from a 4.4 to a 4.9. Ninth, WMXD went from a 4.8 to a 4.5. They may pick up some listeners from 98.7. And 10th place was WDMK FM with a 4.0, up from a 3.8. All the urban stations did pretty well during that month. Mornings, 2554. This is the key race. A lot of money depends on it, and this is the most hotly contested numbers and some very interesting readings here. Number 1, Drew and Mike WRIF with a 10.0, good for first place, and back to double digits, which they hadn't had since Drew left the station almost 2 years ago this month. In second place, Jay Towers and Bill McAllister at WXYT with a 6.7 rating, up from a 6.3. So as Drew and Mike got better, they also picked up some points. Dr. Don, Rachel Hunter, Grunwald went from a 5.2 to a 5.9, good for third place in the morning. Great news for the country station, again, without competition, they're scoring points. Fourth place, WDRQ, 5.4 to a 5.7 with no morning talent bill. Very interesting, as always. Fifth place, WJLB, Coco and Friends in the morning, went from a 4.5 to a 5.7 as they shot up. Again, it was a big month for all urban stations. Sixth place, WKQI, Mojo in the morning, went from a 5.7 to a 5.3, and I've echoed this in previous ratings. Look out, there'll be more competition in the morning for them with 98.7 switching to the same format. In seventh place, WDVD, Blaine and Lisa went from a 5.3 to a 5.1, a little bit disappointing there, but in eighth place, the return of John Mason at WGPR FM. Mason with a 5.0, up 1.3, good for eighth place, his first top 10 finish in many moons, and his first top 10 finish since he went on WGPR. Great month for John Mason. Ninth place, WCSX, that would be Dominski and Doyle. They went from a 4.4 to a 4.6, good for ninth place. And 10th place was WMXD, Steve Harvey, once a general number 2 placement behind Drew and Mike in the 25-54 age bracket, went from a 4.9 to a 4.5, good for 10th place, an unusually slumping number for Steve Harvey after he came into the market and blew Tom Joyner out, essentially. Now he finds himself being trumped by the local voice, John Mason. Often we don't talk about what women listen to. Let's look at the women's numbers. We'll give you the top 5. These are for women age 25-54, the number all day long. Number 1 station, WDVD, with a 9.4. That's down from a 9.8, but still they have a hefty lead over second place finisher, WJLB, which has a 6.7 rating. Also with a 6.7 rating is WYCD. Country, again, strong without competition in the market. Fourth place, WKQI, went from a 7.5 to a 6.6. Again, another downtrend for a station that now faces heated competition in the marketplace with 98.7, switching over to that format. Fifth place, WMXD. The Mix with a 6.7. They went down to a 5.9, but they may pick up some disgruntled listeners from 98.7. We'll see. In the morning, what do women listen to in the morning? The number 1 show, Blaine and Lisa at WDVD. They went from a 9.0, however, to an 8.2, so they lost some listeners while still maintaining the lead. They're just ahead of Drew and Mike, which among female listeners still have an 8.0 audience, and they're just 0.2 behind Blaine and Lisa. Third place, WKQI, Mojo in the morning. Again, another drop, 8.3 to 7.6. Third place. Fourth is the WJLB morning show, Coco and Friends, 5.9 up to a 7.2. As I mentioned, all the urban stations trended higher. A very good month for those folks. And in fifth place, WMXD, Steve Harvey went from a 7.1 to a 6.5. Again, trending down, something that is of note in a month when all the other urban stations did fairly well. In sixth place among women, Dr. Don and Friends went from a 5.7 to a 6.4. Jim Harper was in seventh place at WMGC, 7.0 to a 6.0. WGPR Mason has a good female audience. He went from a 3.6 to a 5.6, up 2 points. Again, another great performance by WGPR's John Mason, down at the end of the dial at 106.7. That's Sminty with today's radio news ratings. I'll have more in my column for Friday. Thanks for watching and clicking in. Bye-bye.